I met Claire at a mutual friend's engagement party. It was one of those early summer evenings where the sky holds onto the light a little longer, and people linger outside with drinks in their hands, talking like they've known each other forever. I didn't want to go at first. I just wrapped up a grueling quarter at work, and the idea of making small talk with strangers didn't sound appealing. But I went anyway, and that's where I saw her. She was laughing, head tilted back, glass of white wine in one hand, the other gesturing animatedly as she told a story to a group I didn't know. There was a warmth to her, something that pulled you in without trying. I didn't know anything about her, not her name, not what she did, not even if she was single. But I kept glancing back, like my eyes knew something I didn't. It turned out she noticed me too. Claire always did make the first move. She walked up to me and asked what I thought of the DJ. I told her he played too many 90s pop songs. She said that was exactly why she liked him. We talked for the rest of the evening. We went out for coffee the next weekend. Then dinner. Then a weekend trip upstate 2 months later. Everything just fit. Not perfectly, nothing real ever does, but smoothly, like we'd skipped the awkward phase and landed straight into something honest. Claire worked in education advocacy. She had this fire in her for helping kids find their way. I was in systems engineering, quieter by nature, more structured. She teased me about my spreadsheets. I teased her about the stack of half-read books on our nightstand. We were different in ways that made it work. We dated for a little over 2 years before I proposed. It was a small thing, just us and a picnic in the park we always walked through on Sundays. I didn't make a speech. I just asked. She said yes before I even finished the sentence. Our wedding was low-key but perfect. A lakeside ceremony, close friends and family, and Claire in a dress that made me forget how to breathe. We moved into a small but bright house on the edge of the city soon after. Life began to unfold in the best kind of ordinary way: shared grocery lists, lazy Saturday mornings, quiet dinners after long days. We made a home. Not just the physical space, but the kind of life that felt solid. Predictable in the right ways, full of little rituals and comfortable silences. It wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. I used to look over at her in the morning, hair a mess, still half asleep, mumbling something about needing coffee, and think, this is it. This is the life I hoped I'd find. Claire and I settled into married life like we were meant for it. We moved into a 2-story house with a small yard, nothing extravagant, but it felt like ours from the moment we stepped through the door. The walls were still bare, the kitchen smelled like fresh paint, and our mattress was still on the floor that first night. We ate takeout and fell asleep on top of the covers, exhausted and happy. I don't think I'll ever forget that night. We carved out a rhythm between us over the next few years. Claire took the lead on decorating. She had a knack for finding beauty in strange places. Vintage markets, clearance aisles, even a random street-side free box could yield a treasure in her hands. I was more practical. I handled repairs, managed the budget, kept track of warranties and bills. Between us, the house started to feel not just lived in, but loved in. We both kept busy with our careers. Claire was passionate about her nonprofit work, long hours, emotionally heavy days, but she always came home with stories. About the kid who finally passed his GED, the teenager who got her first college acceptance letter. She never bragged, but her eyes always sparkled when she talked about them. I listened, even when I was tired. Especially when I was tired. Because it mattered to her, and she mattered to me. My work was steadier, quieter, software design, mostly back-end systems. I liked the structure, the way problems could be solved with logic, persistence, and a bit of creative thinking. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well and gave us the kind of stability Claire didn't have growing up. I never minded being the steady one. We weren't the couple who posted anniversary photos online with matching hashtags. We had our own way of marking time. Claire would leave little sticky notes in my laptop bag, inside the fridge, once even stuck to the inside of the toilet lid, that one said, "Smile, it's almost Friday." I started keeping a drawer full of them. Still do. My favorite is one that just said, "I'm glad I found you." Our weekends were our sanctuary. Saturdays were for errands and cleaning, then dinner out or sometimes just wine and pasta at home. Sundays were slower. We made pancakes together more often than we should have, usually with music playing low in the background and the dog weaving between our legs in hopes of dropped crumbs. We didn't travel as much as we talked about, but we had our spots, a cabin near the mountains in the fall, the same little inn by the beach every summer. We had friends over for game nights. We hosted Thanksgiving twice. We argued sometimes, but never about anything that stuck. Our life was ours. Shared. Quietly joyful. And if anyone had asked me then if I was happy, I would have said yes without hesitation. I was. Life with Claire was full and warm, and I felt lucky every single day. Over time, the seasons of our life settled into their own natural rhythm. The house changed little by little, new paint in the living room, a better coffee maker, a few plants Claire swore she wouldn't forget to water. And she didn't, mostly. We built routines without meaning to, brushing our teeth side by side every morning, taking turns making dinner, though she was always better at it, folding laundry on the living room floor while a movie played in the background we weren't really watching. I loved the quiet parts the most. The way Claire hummed to herself when she watered the herbs on the kitchen windowsill. The way she'd lean into me on the couch and fall asleep with her legs tangled in mine, our dog snoring at our feet. I remember thinking, more than once, this is the kind of life people search for and rarely find. Claire had this way of filling the house with life. There were always new books on the nightstand, new playlists echoing softly through the speakers, the occasional burnt attempt at some exotic recipe she'd picked up from a friend. She wasn't perfect, but she was real, and real mattered more to me than anything else. She was spontaneous in the little ways I never could be, and I think I offered her the sense of rootedness she didn't even know she needed. She made friends wherever she went. I was more reserved. I had my small circle, mostly colleagues and old college buddies, but Claire thrived in social settings. She'd host small gatherings, dinner parties with mismatched chairs and candles melted halfway down the holders. People loved being around her. I loved watching her in those moments, so in her element, laughing too loud, refilling drinks, telling stories I'd heard a dozen times but never minded hearing again. We weren't without our imperfections. We never got around to remodeling the upstairs bathroom, and the backyard was still mostly patchy grass and wishful thinking. Sometimes we'd forget to kiss goodnight. Sometimes we'd spend entire evenings lost in our separate screens, side by side but not quite together. But I never questioned whether we were solid. Our bond felt like something forged in the background, through years of shared mornings and sleepy conversations and knowing glances across crowded rooms. People ask now and then why we didn't have kids. The truth was, we talked about it many times. But life moved, and work was busy, and we just kept living the way we were. We always said, maybe next year, until it became, maybe this is just how our story is supposed to look. And we were okay with that. At least, I was. I remember one night not long ago, we were sitting on the back porch, watching the sun dip below the fence line. Claire was wrapped in a blanket, holding a glass of wine, her hair up in that messy twist she always did when she was relaxed. I reached over, took her hand, and said, I like this version of us. She looked over and smiled. Me too. And I believed her. It started with a conversation I never saw coming. We were having one of our usual Friday nights, just the two of us, takeout from the Thai place down the street, her legs draped over mine on the couch. The dog was asleep between us, the lights were dim, some old movie we both liked playing in the background. It was one of those nights that felt normal in the best kind of way. That's what made it so jarring when she put her wine glass down and said, in a voice far too calm, Can I ask you something? And I want you to really think about it before you answer. I paused the movie, turned to her. Sure. What's up? She took a deep breath, and something in her eyes shifted. Not nervous, exactly, but careful. I've been reading a lot lately, about open relationships, about couples who explore that together. I don't know, I want to talk to you about it. See how you'd feel. I didn't say anything at first. I was trying to make sure I'd actually heard her right. I wasn't angry. Not then. Just blindsided. I kept waiting for her to laugh it off, say it was just curiosity or something she'd read in a podcast recap. But she didn't. You're serious? I asked. I just want us to have a conversation, she said. I love you. I'm not unhappy, I swear. But I feel like we've both settled into something that maybe could be more. You know? We only get one life. And I keep wondering if we're limiting ourselves by pretending the only way to love is the traditional way. I wanted to respond with something thoughtful, something fair. But all I could say was, I'm not interested in sharing you, Claire. I'm not wired that way. She didn't argue, not really. Just nodded. Said she understood. Said it was okay. She even leaned in and kissed me gently before grabbing the dishes and heading into the kitchen. I sat there, not knowing what to do with the sudden weight in my chest. We never brought it up again. Not directly. But something changed after that night. It was subtle at first, less eye contact, more time on her phone, longer gym sessions, more late meetings at work. She still kissed me goodbye every morning, still curled up next to me some nights, still laughed at my stupid puns. But there was a distance growing, and I didn't know how to reach across it. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe just a phase. Maybe she was feeling restless and thought that kind of idea was some midlife recalibration. She said she understood my answer. I trusted her. I wanted to. I didn't know. I couldn't know that the conversation had been more than hypothetical, that she was already crossing that line. She just hadn't told me yet. It started with the gym bag. Claire had always been organized in a way that looked like chaos to anyone else, clothes draped over chairs, earrings scattered across nightstands, receipts in every pocket. But her gym bag was her one zone of order. Protein bar in the side pocket, towel rolled tight, water bottle clipped to the zipper. Every other day, like clockwork. But a few weeks after that open relationship conversation, I noticed it sitting by the front door for 3 days straight. Untouched. "Thought you had a class this morning," I said one night as she came home, a little breathless, cheeks flushed. She was wearing jeans and a casual top. Definitely not gym clothes. "Oh, yeah, I was going to go, but I just took a walk instead. Needed some air." She kissed my cheek and walked past me into the kitchen. It wasn't a big deal. People change routines. But I remember standing in the hallway, staring at that gym bag, and feeling the smallest itch in my gut. After that, it was little things. Her phone started living in her pocket instead of the countertop. She turned it face down when we sat down for dinner. One night, I reached for it to pass it to her and saw a notification disappear before I could read it. Just a glimpse of a name I didn't recognize and a message that started with, "Last night was." I didn't say anything. Not because I was scared of the answer. Because I didn't have a question. Not yet. Claire started going to networking events. Once or twice a week. Not unusual for her field, and she'd always been someone who thrived in social circles, even ones that changed constantly. But they came without warning now. A quick change of clothes, a spritz of perfume I hadn't smelled on her in months. "Don't wait up," she'd say, smiling at me over her shoulder. And I didn't. Not at first. But something about the way she said it, like a line she'd rehearsed. I tried to tell myself I was imagining things. That this was just the tail end of that open relationship conversation playing tricks on me, making me paranoid. We were fine. We still had our weekends. We still made dinner together sometimes. We still laughed. But there was a new quiet in her. Not the comfortable kind. The distant kind. The kind that feels like the room's full of fog, and you're the only one who notices. One night, I woke up and found her sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at her phone. The light from the screen lit up the side of her face, and I could see the crease between her brows. She didn't hear me stir. Didn't move. Just typed something, waited, typed again. "Can't sleep?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She jumped a little and turned to me, smiling quickly. "Just couldn't shut my brain off. You know how it is." I nodded, rolled over, and closed my eyes. But I didn't sleep. That night, for the first time in our marriage, I realized I didn't know what she was thinking. And for the first time, I wasn't sure she wanted me to. The thing about suspicion is that it doesn't arrive all at once. It creeps in quietly, attaching itself to ordinary moments and hollowing them out until even the simplest gestures feel off. I didn't wake up one morning convinced something was wrong. I just started noticing how much space had grown between us and how quickly that space was filling with silence. Claire had always been affectionate in this absent-minded way. She'd reach for my hand in the grocery store, brush her fingers through my hair when I read on the couch, kiss me softly on the back of my neck while I brushed my teeth. It was never over the top, just natural, unconscious intimacy. But lately, she touched me less. Not completely withdrawn. She still said, "Love you," when she left the house, still kissed me goodnight. But it felt like muscle memory more than meaning. I told myself we were both just busy. That maybe we were tired. That the chill I felt wasn't from her, but from the stress of work, the change in the seasons, or maybe just the weight of routine settling in. But that lie became harder to maintain the more our lives slipped out of rhythm. Our conversations used to come easily. Now they were careful, clipped, and increasingly surface level. I'd ask how her day went, and she'd smile and say, "Busy. Same old." Then ask about mine, but I could tell she wasn't really listening. When I bring up something we used to joke about, some old memory, a callback to a running inside joke, she'd laugh, but it felt late, like she was catching up to a moment she wasn't part of anymore. I started to feel like I was performing the role of a husband in a play she was no longer watching. One Friday night, I suggested we stay in and make one of her favorite meals, lemon garlic pasta with shrimp and too much Parmesan. She smiled and agreed. But during dinner, she seemed distracted, her phone lighting up more often than usual. I noticed the way she'd glance down and smile to herself before flipping it over. I didn't say anything. What would I even say? I wasn't angry, just unsettled, like I was dining with someone who had somewhere else they'd rather be. Later that night, I brought up a trip we'd once talked about, visiting a cabin upstate we'd stayed at a few years ago. Back then, she'd called it her reset button, a place where everything slowed down and we remembered how to be still together. I thought suggesting it again might reignite something between us. She hesitated, then gave a tight smile. Maybe. Let's see how the next couple weeks look. She didn't bring it up again. The following weekend, she left early Saturday morning for what she called a day-long retreat her nonprofit had organized. Normally, she'd ask if I wanted to tag along for the drive or meet her somewhere afterward. This time, she kissed me on the forehead, said, "Don't wait up," and was out the door before I could even offer to pack her lunch. Around noon, I found myself standing in the kitchen, pouring coffee into a mug she'd painted on our second anniversary. It was chipped along the rim now, but I kept it, partly out of habit, partly because of what it meant. I ran my thumb across the lettering, her loopy handwriting, the words, "Ours forever," curling along the ceramic like a promise. I held that mug and realized I hadn't heard from her all day. No check-in, no photo from the retreat, no quick, "thinking of you" text like she used to send without fail whenever we were apart. The silence rang louder than anything else. And still, I didn't have a reason to doubt her. Not really. No proof, no confrontation, no lies I could catch her in. Just this steady hum of unease, like the feeling when you leave the house and can't remember if you locked the door. Nothing to panic about, nothing you can point to, but it lingers. It follows you everywhere, and you can't shake the feeling that something's already been left open behind you. There's a particular kind of loneliness that creeps in when the person who shares your bed starts to feel like a stranger. It doesn't shout. It doesn't knock things over or scream in your face. It just sits quietly between you, at the dinner table, in the car, on the couch, changing the temperature of everything. Claire had always had her own life outside of me. That was something I loved about her. She never needed me to fill every space in her world. She had her friends, her causes, her late-night book clubs, her solo coffee dates where she scribbled ideas in a journal she never let me read. I respected that space. But lately, it didn't feel like space. It felt like absence. She started getting dressed with the door closed. At first, I thought nothing of it. Then I realized she was doing it even when I wasn't in the room. And when I'd walk in afterward, the scent of perfume still hung in the air, something floral and sharp, not her usual. She started wearing it more often, even on ordinary days when she used to stick to lotion and lip balm. One afternoon, as she walked past me in a fitted dress I hadn't seen before, hair done in that deliberate way she usually saved for weddings, I asked if she had a special meeting. "Nope," she said, smiling like it was nothing. "Just felt like dressing up for myself." And that was that. It was little moments like that, piling up in the corners of our life. Her music tastes changed, subtly, playlists full of newer, moodier artists I didn't recognize. Her phone was always near her hand, but when I glanced over, the screen was usually black, locked, waiting, quiet. She started going out more, even during the week. Always with a reason. Always with a smile. Just meeting Mel for drinks. Or, "Julia wants to vent about work." Or, "There's a gallery opening near the office." I knew these friends. I'd met most of them. But the way she said their names, it was like she was naming shadows. I tried not to spiral. I really did. But the more I tried to focus on work, on errands, on anything else, the more the quiet between us took up space in my head. I would sit beside her on the couch while she scrolled through her phone, and I'd wonder, not out of jealousy, but out of something closer to grief, when did I become a footnote in her day? One night, I suggested we have a date night. Just the two of us. I even made a reservation at the same restaurant where we had our first anniversary. Dim lighting, red wine. That dessert she always raved about. She said yes without hesitation, and for a brief second, I felt hope. Maybe I was overthinking everything. Maybe life had just gotten loud, and this would help us find our way back to each other. But the dinner was off. She looked incredible, radiant even. But the conversation was hollow. I asked her about work. She offered one-word answers. I told her a story from my day, and she smiled politely, eyes drifting to her phone more than once. When the dessert came, She took a photo of it, posted it to her story, and didn't tag me. That stung more than I expected. On the ride home, she stared out the window, and I drove in silence. I wanted to ask, "Are you unhappy?" I wanted to ask, "Is there someone else?" But the truth is, I was terrified of the answers. And worse, terrified that she wouldn't deny them. Just offer me that same soft smile she'd been giving me for weeks. The kind of smile you give a stranger who's being polite, but asking too much. That night, lying in bed beside her, I stared at the ceiling and listened to her breathe. She fell asleep fast. I didn't. I wasn't sure what was happening between us. I only knew something was. Not a fight, not an explosion. Just this slow unraveling I couldn't stop, couldn't explain, couldn't name. And that was somehow worse than anything I could imagine. It was a Wednesday. I remember that detail clearly. Not because it was unusual, but because it was the kind of middle-of-the-week haze where nothing is supposed to happen. I was supposed to be at work. A full day of back-to-back client meetings followed by an evening networking mixer I didn't want to attend, but had already RSVP'd to. My calendar was packed. My whole day was accounted for. But around 10 in the morning, I got a call from the office manager. The fire alarms had gone off on our floor, and the building had to be evacuated. "Might as well take the rest of the day," she said with a laugh. "Everything will be reset by tomorrow." So I did what I never do. I didn't call Claire to let her know I was coming home. It wasn't intentional. I just wanted a quiet afternoon, maybe catch up on some work from the dining room table, maybe surprise her if she happened to be around. She usually wasn't on Wednesdays. Those were her busy days, jam-packed with outreach and staff meetings. But as I turned onto our street and pulled into the driveway, I saw her car, parked in its usual place. My first thought wasn't suspicion. It was concern. Maybe she was sick. Maybe she had to cancel her day. Maybe she just needed rest. I didn't knock. I didn't creep. I just walked inside. The house was quiet. Not unusually so. Just the normal hush of mid-morning when no one expects to be disturbed. I set my bag down gently, instinctively quiet now, not wanting to wake her if she was napping. Then I heard it. Not a voice. Not laughter. Just movement. Footsteps. A quick shuffle. The low thump of something. Maybe a door closing. Maybe a bed frame shifting. I froze in place. Not with fear. With that feeling you get when your body knows something before your mind does. The hallway was dim, but I could see the light from our bedroom spilling out into the carpet. I walked slowly, step by step. My heart wasn't racing. It was steady. Almost too steady. There was no plan in my head. No dramatic confrontation waiting to happen. Just the cold certainty that I was about to see something I couldn't unsee. And I did. The door wasn't even closed all the way. Through the gap, I saw Claire, my wife, kneeling on the bed, hair tousled, face flushed. And behind her, someone I didn't recognize at first. A man, shirtless, hands on her hips, moving with a rhythm that made my stomach turn. I didn't make a sound, didn't push the door open. I just stood there, suspended in that split second where time stretches and everything you've ever believed about your life fractures into pieces. Then she turned her head and saw me. The look on her face was something I'll never forget. Not guilt, not shame, just wide-eyed shock, like she'd forgotten I existed and was only now remembering. The man followed her gaze, locking eyes with me for just a moment before scrambling off the bed, grabbing his jeans in a panic. I opened the door. Claire said my name, once, quietly, like a question, but I didn't answer. I looked at her, then at him, then back at her. And then I spoke. "Get out." My voice was low, calm, completely unlike what I felt. He hesitated. Claire reached for the sheet, pulling it over herself, trembling now, her mouth opening and closing like she couldn't find the right words. I said, "Get out." This time, louder, sharper. The man bolted, clothes half on, shoes in hand. He brushed past me like I was invisible. I didn't even flinch. The only sound left in the room was Claire sobbing quietly into the blanket she was now curled under, trying to hide from what she couldn't undo. I stood there for a moment longer, just staring, my hands by my sides, my chest hollow, my mind a storm I couldn't put into words. Then I turned, walked down the hallway, and closed the bedroom door behind me. Not to give her privacy, but because I couldn't stand to see her face. Not yet. Not ever. Maybe. I didn't say a word to her as I walked out the front door. I didn't slam it. I didn't grab my keys in a storm of fury. I just left, calmly, quietly, because I knew if I stayed, I might lose whatever part of myself hadn't already shattered. I got in my car and drove with no direction, just enough movement to keep from combusting. After 20 minutes of aimless turns, I pulled into a parking lot and sat there with my hands gripping the wheel until the blood drained from my fingers. The silence inside the car was deafening. I stared at the dashboard, not crying, not shaking, just empty. That strange kind of emptiness that comes after a bomb goes off. The silence after the blast, where everything still stands, but nothing is whole. I don't know how long I sat there. Eventually, I called a locksmith, told him I needed the locks changed, that I wanted it done immediately. I didn't explain why. I didn't need to. There was something in my voice, I think, that told him not to ask questions. Then I called my office assistant and told her to deactivate Claire's access to everything: email, files, all of it. Claire had worked with me for years, helping on the operations side of my firm. It was how we'd built part of our life: shared space, shared work, shared ambitions. I ended that, just like I'd end everything else. The calls were short, efficient. I spoke like I was placing orders for office supplies. When I returned to the house, the locksmith was finishing up. He handed me a new set of keys and asked if I wanted the old ones destroyed. I nodded. When he left, I stood in the front hall, listening. The house was dead quiet. I walked to the bedroom. She was gone. The bed sheets had been thrown back in a rush, the same perfume she'd worn that morning still lingering faintly in the air. I sat down on the edge of the bed and looked at the space where she had been. That spot on the mattress had held the woman I thought I'd spend my life with. Now it held nothing. She tried to come back that evening. I saw her through the peephole, messy hair, red-rimmed eyes, knocking softly at first, then harder. She tried her key. When it didn't work, she knocked again. I didn't answer. She called my name, whispered it at first, then louder. "Please," she said. "Just talk to me." I didn't move. I didn't speak. I waited behind the door with my heart pounding in my chest, and my jaw clenched so tightly I thought my teeth might crack. Eventually, she stopped. I watched through the blinds as she walked back to her car, sat behind the wheel, and didn't drive away for a long time. That night, she messaged me texts, missed calls, voicemails. All the things I had longed for in the weeks she'd grown distant. But now, they were desperate and empty. I didn't respond. I lay in the spare bedroom, the one I'd been avoiding for years because the mattress was stiff and the window was drafty, and I stared at the ceiling until morning. The next day, I had her belongings boxed. Not carefully, not with the kind of reverence you give to a chapter you hope to revisit. Just folded and taped and pushed out of my life. I didn't bring her inside to get them. I stacked the boxes in the garage and told her she had a week to arrange pickup. I wouldn't be home. I wouldn't be part of it. She kept texting, kept asking if we could talk, kept pleading for some kind of conversation, some space to explain. I didn't want an explanation. I didn't want to understand. I didn't want to hear her tell me it was a mistake, or that it didn't mean anything, or that it just happened. I had stood in the doorway. I had seen her body wrapped around someone else's. No words would make that disappear. No sentence could stitch together the version of my life she had ripped apart with her choices. She even showed up at my office. My receptionist told her I wasn't available, that she no longer worked with us. Claire begged her to put me on the phone. I was standing in the back room when it happened, listening. I didn't come out. That night, I blocked her number. The silence that followed was the first breath of calm I'd had in days. I poured myself a drink, sat on the porch, and watched the sky fade into dusk. Alone. I used to imagine that betrayal would arrive like thunder, loud and dramatic, with broken furniture and screaming matches. But it doesn't. It comes quietly, just a door half closed, a glance too long, a whisper in a hallway. And when it explodes, it doesn't burn the house down. It just leaves it cold and locked. In the days that followed, I stopped counting how many times Claire tried to reach me. Calls came from numbers I didn't recognize, new phone lines, probably friends lending her theirs. There were voicemails, some quiet and tearful, others frantic and pleading. I didn't listen past the first few seconds. I deleted them all. Text came in waves. Paragraphs of apology. Then silence. Then more messages, memories, old jokes, lines from songs we once shared. As if nostalgia might soften the blow of what she'd done. As if reminding me of who she used to be might rewrite the version of her I'd watched crumble in front of me. But there's a point where history stops being a tether and becomes a weight. She emailed too. I didn't block her there, not yet. I think part of me wanted to see if she would say something real, something that acknowledged not just the pain she caused, but the life she dismantled. But even in her long, winding explanations, the core of it felt hollow. I never meant to hurt you. I was confused. It wasn't serious. Words she'd probably convinced herself were true. But they all circled the same center, an unwillingness to admit that the moment she made that choice, the moment she crossed that line, she let go of me. She let go of us. What struck me the most wasn't the betrayal itself, it was how quickly she moved in the days after. One evening, I saw a photo of her tagged by a mutual acquaintance. She was at a cafe I didn't recognize, seated across from the same man I had walked in on. They weren't touching, but their body language was intimate, familiar. She looked thinner, tired, but she was smiling. That smile, small, guarded, looked nothing like the one she used to give me across our kitchen table. I don't know if they're together. I don't want to know. I'm not checking for updates. I just saw it, the way you see a crack in a windshield after a storm. You didn't know it was there, but now you can't stop noticing it. I haven't responded to anything, not out of pettiness, not out of vengeance, but because there's nothing left to say. I could shout. I could cry. I could demand an apology that came from somewhere deeper than her surface guilt. But it wouldn't undo the moment I saw her in that bed. That one image took every word from my mouth and burned it to ash. She tried to show up at my parents' house once. I wasn't there, but my father told me about it later. She stood at the door with her shoulders hunched and her voice trembling. Said she just wanted to talk to me. My father told her calmly, but clearly, that I'd made my wishes known, that I deserved my peace, that if she truly loved me, she would respect the silence I had chosen. She cried, he said. Stood there for a long time before finally walking away. Sometimes I sit in the living room, lights dim, and look around at the pieces of the life we built. The bookshelves she insisted we stain together. The lamp we bought on impulse during a weekend trip. The tiny scar on the edge of the coffee table from when she dropped a wine glass and swore she'd fix it but never did. It's all still here, but the warmth is gone. The air feels different. Not haunted, exactly. Just cleared out. Like the echo that remains when laughter leaves a room. People ask if I'm okay. I nod. I say, I'm getting there. And I mean it. Some days, I believe it. I go to work. I go to the gym. I cook for myself. I sleep. Sometimes I even sleep well. The worst of the anger has passed. What's left is quieter grief, maybe. Or just the long, slow adjustment to solitude. But I've made a promise to myself. I won't go back. No matter what she says. No matter how many apologies arrive. No matter how lonely the nights get. Because the second I opened that bedroom door, something inside me broke. And maybe that break was the only honest thing that's happened between us in a long time. It's strange how a life can split in two without warning. Before and after. That's how I think of it now, like a book with a single torn page separating one chapter from the next. On one side, there was us. The quiet routines. The shared glances across the dinner table. The small inside jokes that made sense only to us. On the other side, there's just me. People expect rage to last. They think if you've been betrayed, the wound should always stay raw. But it doesn't. Not really. After a while, the sharp edges wear down. The fire dims. You stop going over every moment, trying to find the second everything went wrong. You accept, eventually, that the worst part isn't what happened, it's that you missed it until it was too late. And that missing it doesn't make you foolish. It makes you human. I've stopped waiting for the apology that means something. I've stopped wondering if she regrets it, or if she misses me, or if the man she cheated with is still around. Those questions are dead ends. I've come to understand that closure isn't something someone else gives you. It's something you give yourself when you decide to stop living inside someone else's choices. Some nights are harder than others. I still wake up expecting the weight of her beside me. I still make too much coffee in the mornings out of habit. I still reach for the passenger seat to point out something on the road before I remember there's no one there. That kind of muscle memory doesn't go away overnight. But I'm learning how to live around it. The house feels different now. Not cold, not anymore. Just mine. I've moved a few things around. Donated the couch we used to curl up on. Repainted the bedroom. Bought a new set of dishes because the old ones carried too many echoes. I'm not erasing her. I'm just making room. For quiet. For healing. For whatever comes next. People tell me I'll find someone again. That time heals. That there's still love out there waiting for me. I smile and nod, because maybe they're right. Maybe someday there will be someone new. But I'm not in a rush to fill the space she left behind. I'm not afraid of being alone. Not anymore. Because I've learned something I didn't expect to. I can survive heartbreak. I can survive betrayal. I can rebuild from the ruins of something I thought would never collapse. I look back at the man I was, the one who paused that movie when she first asked about an open relationship, who tried to act like everything was still normal while the floor shifted beneath him, and I don't see weakness. I see someone who loved deeply, who gave everything, who didn't deserve what happened, but carried himself through it anyway. That man wasn't a fool. He was just a husband. And now he's something else. Whole, alone, and free.